most people that I've talked to in China, and I think this is a sentiment very widely shared, would hold that every square inch of the present territory of the People's Republic of China is the sacred soil of the motherland, and always has been, or if it hasn't really been, it should have been, part of the sacred soil of the motherland. And China is China writ large, and that is China as it has always been, and China's rightful realm, and not one grain of sand of the sacred motherland is ever going to be lost to anybody else. Well, this is a pretty ahistorical attitude because the present boundaries of the People's Republic of China represent China's own imperialism, the very dramatic expansion of the Manchu dynasty in the late 17th and early 18th century, where the Cheng dynasty just went out and conquered, well, it owned Manchuria, because that's where the Manchus were from, conquered Mongolia, conquered Xinjiang, conquered Tibet, conquered parts of the Yunnan borderlands, and incorporated them into China. So the sacred motherland is a pretty recent vintage, but it is now hotly defended as part of Chinese nationalism. And the insistence that all of that territory is Chinese. Inner Mongolia is Chinese, Manchuria is Chinese, which it is now, there are hardly any Manchus left. Xinjiang is Chinese, Tibet is Chinese. Well, the Tibetans don't think that Tibet is Chinese. A lot of Uyghurs don't think that Xinjiang is Chinese, and there's a difference of opinion there. But this is a very deeply held tenet of Chinese nationalism, and it's going to continue to remain a potent force, and I think a source of particular difficulty in China in the years ahead. And I would just say, parenthetically to this, that the Chinese have a very, very long history of oppressing and belittling and absorbing their minority peoples. They are not very nice to the non-Han 5% or so of the population, and have never been. I can point you to Han Dynasty texts that make statements so racist that anyone making them today would certainly never get on the Supreme Court. Statements like the Hu, who were a people in what is now Mongolia. Well, there are a few smart Hu, but most of them are dumb, so we say they're all dumb. And that kind of condescending attitude toward non-Chinese peoples within the borders of China itself is something that creates very serious problems for people who are on the receiving end of that. Last thing that I think is an interesting legacy from the past is the attitude toward the environment. A lot of people would like to think that there's a kind of Chinese inherent environmentalism, that there's something about Taoism, for example, that creates this profound respect for the environment. That people will point to Sung Dynasty landscape painting, enormous paintings of mountains and forests and waterfalls, and you look really closely and there are little tiny people down at the bottom walking on paths and everything. This is how environmental the Chinese are, because they really see people as a small force fitting into the overwhelming force of nature. Well, all well and good, but you can put against that the fact that the Chinese landscape is one of the most human-created landscapes anywhere in the world. The Chinese have been altering and modifying, not necessarily for the better, their environment for many, many, many centuries. And this was realized early on. The Book of Mencius, which dates to about 320 BC, has a famous parallel of Ox Mountain, which says that everyone now believes that Ox Mountain never had any trees on it. Well, once Ox Mountain was fully forested, the people went and cut down all the trees, and then when the trees started to grow up again, the goats went and grazed on the trees and ate all the seedlings, and nothing would grow there, and so everyone says that the Ox Mountain has no trees. And it's very interesting. There's a realization of the profound effects of human action on the landscape. But I think the idea of a kind of inherent or philosophical Chinese environmentalism is as much a myth as the myth that we had here on public service television ads back in the 1970s, the myth of so-called environmental Indian, that guy who looked at ravaged landscapes and here rolled down his cheek, and everyone was supposed to think, well, Indians really took care of the land and were really wrecking it. And then people say, well, what about Indians who needed to kill a couple buffaloes, so they ran a few hundred of them over a cliff? That's not exactly environmentalism. And people talk about Chinese Taoism and say, look at an industrial city from the 17th century like Jingdezhen, the pottery center, where the air pollution was probably worse there in the 17th century than anything that Beijing can throw at us today. So environmental issues are going to be a very big problem in China for the foreseeable future. And I think in this case, a traditional Taoist attitude toward environmentalism is not going to be any help at all. So there are various legacies to look at here, and this is not at all to say that China is unchanging, but China has to confront and contend with and wrestle with its past, just as we all do.
Sort of like we had motor clubs in, I guess, the 1920s or 30s. In any case, in our tableau, we can see that this couple is nervous. They don't know who this person is or what he wants. Is he going to carjack them? Or is he just trying to sell them a newspaper? And now in intersections in Beijing, increasingly, especially with this downturn, you're seeing more down-and-out folks coming up trying to sell, make a little profit by selling newspapers. The point here is no one knows what to expect from the other, and everyone is scared of each other. And no one has any idea how all this is going to turn out. So let me offer one piece of statistical evidence. Last year, the Pew Global Attitude Survey asked Chinese to identify the biggest problems facing them. The economy was the #1 concern, specifically rising prices at that point, which were identified by 96% as either a very big or moderately big problem. More interesting was the #2 problem, the rich-poor gap, noted by 89% of respondents. And we should note that the Pew sample was heavily slated towards urban areas. So this shows that concerns about inequality are widely shared. Naturally, the losers are concerned about this, but the winners are also quite upset or quite concerned about what this means. They're concerned about Luan, what John was talking about, the chaos that could grow out of these inequalities. So when I look at these poll answers, I think I'm seeing a little bit of a subtext that these urbanites are admitting that they live in a system and they're prospering in a system that has serious problems. The rules are messed up and it's probably not sustainable. But from their perspective, they have to play this game. You can't not play this game. And this is the root of the tension in relation that I see between Chinese people and inside individual Chinese minds. So now a few anecdotes about this. The first one was told to me by a Chinese friend, a graduate student at one of China's elite universities. He's from a sort of a medium-sized town in one of the provinces along in the center of China. At the end of a New Year's family banquet, he mentioned how his uncle, half drunk, took him aside, and with tears in his eyes, the uncle said, "In China today, you have to make a choice. You can be good or you can be successful. I've chosen to be good, and it's so hard. It's so hard." This good uncle, who was a manager at a bank, probably had lots of opportunities for quick remuneration, probably via kickbacks from loans. And yet, this man's reward for his integrity, my friend hinted, was disrespect from his wife. Why, she wondered, don't we have the money to purchase a bigger apartment, to buy a car, to vacation in Thailand, to secure our child a spot at a better school? Everyone else is doing this. Everyone else is taking the money. My friend was relating this story because he too was facing a dilemma. He'd been offered a chance to write a senior essay for an undergraduate in his department, a student who happened to be the son of a vice minister. And vice ministers are able to send their children to top universities even if they don't have the necessarily requisite score on their entrance exams. So this would be a simple task for my friend, and the payoff would have been about 5,000 renminbi for this one essay, which is now $800 or so, which is a couple months' salary for an average recent graduate.